As much as we hate to admit it, we know there's no way for our favorite comic book characters to be perfectly translated to the big screen. But hey, change can be a good thing, except for when it's not. There are some great Marvel characters out there whose introductions to the MCU have been less than compelling. Some of the toughest, coolest warriors around have been watered down so much they're practically just shadows of their comic book counterparts. We'll talk about some awesome characters who have been done dirty by Marvel Studios and haven't had their chance to shine on the big screen. Hulk. The Hulk is often a difficult character to portray under the best of circumstances, and then there's the fact that the rights to the character are tied up with Universal. This is why we haven't had a standalone Hulk movie since 2008's The Incredible Hulk. Yeah, we'd try to forget about that one too. But the fact that they had to replace Edward Norton with Mark Ruffalo is really the least of the character's problems. In the early days of the MCU, he was just a woefully underdeveloped character who, for some reason, had an unprecedented romance with Natasha Romanoff. Thor Ragnarok was the first movie to show that Hulk was just as unhappy with their arrangement as Bruce Banner. And during Infinity War, he decided he was done taking beatings for him. During Endgame, Hulk and Banner merged off-screen into a character comic book fans know as Professor Hulk. But instead of seeing Bruce grapple with his multiple personalities like he does in the comics, the problem was just introduced and solved so quickly. What was a really great story of inner torment and unbridled rage was over in, well, a snap. The Hulk, Bruce Banner, and this new Professor Hulk aren't terrible characters, but they're pale imitations of what they really should be based on the source material. Vision. Vision is a character who is a much bigger deal in the comic books. Like the Incredible Hulk, he often grapples with his humanity in the comic books, which is an interesting contrast to his incredible powers. Seriously, the MCU version might be able to lift Mjolnir, but in the comics he's ridiculously powerful. He does manage to damage Rhodey's legs in Captain America: Civil War, but they're fixed up with some good old tech from Tony Stark so fast it barely registers as a plot point. And in Infinity War, it was almost absurd what a giant threat the children of Thanos posed to Vision, who should have been able to just shrug them off. Overall, the vision of the MCU has just been kind of underwhelming. But we're not giving up hope quite yet. In the comics, not only is Vision super strong, but he also gets into some wild and wacky situations, both on his own and with the Scarlet Witch. With WandaVision coming to Disney+, we're hoping to see more of Vision and all that he's capable of. Quicksilver. Leading up to Avengers: Age of Ultron, director Joss Whedon warned fans that one of our beloved characters would not make it out alive. But the only problem was that when Pietro Maximoff bit the dust, pretty much nobody in the audience could be bothered to care. And it wasn't just the fact that he didn't even survive an entire movie. Eric Killmonger was a much more meaningful loss despite only being in Black Panther. Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige said losing Quicksilver would surely show repercussions for Ultron's actions, and help develop the character of his sister, Wanda Maximoff. But Pietro disappeared before he even really became Quicksilver. And to make his brief appearance even more annoying, we have to live with the knowledge that Joss Whedon filmed an alternate version of him wearing the Quicksilver suit and somehow surviving. Why couldn't we have gotten that instead of whatever was going on between Bruce Banner and Natasha Romanoff? You know who's a much more convincing ladies' man? Pietro Maximoff. In the comics, Pietro also disapproves of Wanda's relationship with Vision, at least at first. That could have definitely been an interesting aspect of Wanda's arc if Pietro had survived. Ultron. Now, we're not trying to harp on Avengers: Age of Ultron here, but okay, maybe we are. Because the titular character is really one that Marvel straight up did dirty when they brought him to the big screen. Ultron is supposed to be an incredibly powerful, Earth-threatening villain who is so much of a threat that it takes all the Avengers and then some to bring him down. But he's really not that scary. He's less entertaining and nuanced than Loki, and his attempts at humor make him feel less than threatening. He might make a passable villain for a standalone hero movie, but when the Avengers assemble, we want to see them go up against something truly terrifying. Just consider the fact that in the other Avengers movies, our heroes were fighting either directly or indirectly against the Mad Titan Thanos, who wiped out half of all life in the universe. In the comics, Ultron is created by Hank Pym, a character with a definitive dark side. But in Age of Ultron, he's supposed to be a twisted version of Tony Stark, only he comes off more like a rebellious teenager than anything else. It's like comparing Jared Leto's Joker with, well, any other character in all of entertainment. Just anyone. Black Widow. There are a lot of characters the MCU has mishandled, but perhaps the most egregious of them is Natasha Romanoff. Despite being one of the founding Avengers and the only one of them who kept going after Infinity War, she's usually played off as more of an afterthought than anything else. And that's sadly the best-case scenario. In Age of Ultron, she equated her infertility with feeling like a monster, such as the Incredible Hulk. Although Whedon later clarified that she feels like a monster because of her past as an assassin, it didn't come across that way in the movie. Natasha is usually just an assistant to other heroes, and that's when she's not being an awkward love interest for them. She was nowhere near as fleshed out as the male Avengers, and when she made the ultimate sacrifice during Endgame, it seemed like nobody really batted an eye. Our girl didn't even get a funeral after she spent 5 years keeping the world safe while Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, and Clint Barton all did their own things, none of which helped keep the world safe. Of course, we're hoping the standalone Black Widow movie does the character justice, but is it possible to undo what a mess the MCU made of her character? Mantis. There are always some aspects of comic book characters that will need to be changed as their stories are adapted to other mediums. But that being said, Mantis is absolutely unrecognizable when it comes to her movie and comic book counterparts. And that isn't just my always correct and definitely above critique opinion. Even her co-creator, Steve Englehart, says he doesn't understand why they even bothered calling her Mantis in the first place. He admits to enjoying Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but says he had to force himself to stop thinking about what they had done to his character. In the comics, Mantis is a master martial artist, and definitely not the kind of person to sit around while someone calls her ugly. The movie Mantis has no self-confidence and doubts her own abilities, which is a far cry from the Mantis who is assertive, bordering on arrogant. It's not just that Mantis is different, it's that the movie robbed her of everything that made her a positive character. And instead, she comes across as a weak, submissive infantilization of a strong Asian character. I can understand revising Mantis's convoluted comic book story, but there's really no excuse for getting rid of everything that made her awesome, and just making her the butt of Drax's jokes. Lady Sif. Sif is an incredible warrior and is shown to be a good friend of Thor, at least when she's shown at all. Really, the biggest problem with Sif is that she's pretty much disappeared at this point. Actress Jamie Alexander says she would have loved to reprise her role for Thor Ragnarok, but there was a scheduling conflict between that and the show Blind Spot. That might be easy to dismiss as a standard Hollywood scheduling conflict, but let's spill a little tea here. Alexander claims that she was given very little notice about Ragnarok, which was disappointing because she would have done nearly anything to make it work. The studio even stated that Sif perished in the decimation, yet she didn't return for Avengers Endgame like pretty much everyone else. Even Howard the Duck was there. In the comics, Sif grew up alongside Thor and Loki, and she and Thor are way more than just friends and fellow warriors. Many fans thought they were building up to making her his love interest in the MCU as well, but sadly, that never came to be. Janet Van Dyne. Janet Van Dyne is a character I can't harp on too much because she's barely been in the MCU at all. In the movie Ant-Man, her husband Hank Pym reveals that she disappeared into the quantum realm years ago on a mission. And in the sequel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, she's rescued, and that's pretty much it. But in the comics, Janet is the original Wasp, and a very important character. She's even the one who thought of calling their superhero team the Avengers in the first place. We all know Hank Pym is a genius, but let's not forget that Janet is an accomplished leader, businesswoman, and superhero costume designer. That last one may not sound so impressive, but a good costume is important. Not everyone can get away with wearing sweats like Peter Parker. Janet has been a part of many important Marvel Comics storylines, but in the movies, she's already presented as part of a bygone era of superheroes. Instead, she's replaced by her daughter Hope Van Dyne, a character who wasn't even in the comic books. While Hank had a secret daughter, Nadia Van Dyne, Janet was childless unless you count her alternate reality daughter, Katie Summers. Hawkeye. If you hated Clint Barton in the Avengers, don't worry, you're not alone. Even Jeremy Renner wasn't a fan. Of course, he made his MCU debut as an uncredited cameo in Thor, but audiences got to know him better during the Avengers. Well, at least a little, since he spent the majority of the movie under Loki's mind control. Renner was so unhappy with this aspect of the movie that he admitted to pretending to have a heart attack on set, with the hopes that director Joss Whedon would decide to get rid of his character entirely. Some fans even think it would have made way more sense for Hawkeye to lose his life during Age of Ultron instead of Quicksilver, who we barely met. Clint Barton didn't even bother to show up during Infinity War when Thanos was trying to collect the Infinity Stones. In the comics, Clint is not only a more important character, but he's a bold guy with a serious ego. He's not the barely there hero with an occasional amusing one-liner. Clint is more than willing to step up as a leader, and sometimes he's actually too willing, which causes him to butt heads with some of his fellow heroes. The Mandarin. Everyone loves a good movie twist, except when they don't. In Iron Man 3, we were introduced to a character called the Mandarin, who turned out to be an actor named Trevor Slattery who was just pretending to be the Mandarin. While many moviegoers were fine with this, some comic book fans were livid at what Marvel had done. The Mandarin is a cruel criminal who has 10 actual rings which grant him special powers. Even Kevin Feige admits the Mandarin is probably Iron Man's greatest foe in the comic books, and the two have an extremely long history together. So this big reveal in Iron Man 3 felt insulting to a lot of fans who were excited about seeing the character join the MCU since way back in the first Iron Man movie. But hopefully, we'll finally get a decent depiction of the Mandarin during Phase 4. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings has Tony Leung-Chiu-Wai cast as the Mandarin, and this time Marvel knows fans are not happy about the previous depiction of the character. We'll just be keeping our hopes high and our fingers crossed. After all those years, we are finally getting some well-rounded female characters in the MCU, which just highlights how poorly characters like Mantis and Black Widow were treated for so long. Which characters do you think Marvel could have done more with? Share your pick with us in the comment section below and then click on subscribe for more videos from us here at CBR. Bye for now.